G'day, my name's Bear. On the 25th of January 2016 we'll be riding up to Canberra to once again petition the Australian Government with respect to introducing a constitutional referendum for a Bill of Rights. Why is this important to us? A Bill of Rights is very important for Australian citizens. We're one of the only countries in the world that do not have a Bill of Rights to protect our citizens and look after the rights that we hold so dear. A lot of things that you believe are your rights as an Australian citizen, they're not. They're not rights at all. In 1901, when the Constitution of this country was formulated, it was put forward at that time for a general Bill of Rights for Australian citizens. The notion of a general Bill of Rights was actually rejected. Why? Because there was a belief that the members of Parliament would best look after the interests of the Australian people. Now, since 1901, I don't think that's necessarily been the case. I don't necessarily believe that we have had our rights as Australian citizens looked after. One of the rights that they tell us in the Constitution that we have is our right to vote. So what is a right? A right is something that is given to you legally for you to be able to do, and in turn not do. But in 1924 they passed the Compulsory Voting Act. What this means is you don't have a right whether you want to vote or not. You're legally bound and obliged to vote. If you don't vote, you get fined. You get punished under the law. That's not a right. Never has been, never will be. Since compulsory voting was enacted up until today, on no less than 3 occasions, federal senators and members have attempted to bring in and introduce a Bill of Rights into Parliament, and it hasn't made it. It hasn't been passed. Why? Australian government, what are you frightened of? Why are you frightened of going to ask the Australian people if they want their rights, the rights that they've earned as Australian citizens, protected? What are you worried about? It's a bit like the same-sex marriage debate. Whether you agree with it or not, put it to the people. Let them tell you whether they agree with it or not. This is our country. It's a wonderful country. People come here from all over the world to share the freedoms that we have, or the freedoms they believe we have. Put it to the people, not a plebiscite. A plebiscite means nothing. All a plebiscite is a false belief that to the people that you may do something. Actually ask them in a referendum and take it before the government. If you're going to spend the money, spend it once and spend it wisely. We found that you're not really good at that at the best of times. We've got people and pensioners living on the poverty line, people who have given everything to this country. It's not good enough. John Howard in 2009 argued against a Bill of Rights for Australia as transferring power from elected politicians, he thought, populist politics, to unelected constitutional judges and bureaucrats. Well, okay then, if that's the case, what about the separation of powers that was given to us within the Constitution. The separation of powers clearly outlines that there is to be an executive, a legislature and a judiciary. A judiciary to ensure that the laws that are made by the government are enacted fairly. Yet we are seeing states override this and take away those abilities. When is it going to stop? People believe, and it's a false belief, that there is certain rights that we have, a right to associate. We don't have a right to associate. There are 5 explicit rights in the Constitution. The right to vote, we've already covered. You don't have a right to vote. You have an obligation to vote. A protection against acquisition of your property on unjust terms. For those of you who have watched The Castle, you know what I mean. The right to a trial by jury. Freedom of religion and prohibition of discrimination on the basis of state residency. So we can't pick on each other for living in different states, even though we do, because that's the Australian way. So can the Commonwealth Human Rights Commissioner help you? The answer is no. They're a toothless tiger. Individuals, you can complain to the Human Rights Commissioner about the conduct by or on behalf of the Commonwealth. But even if the Commonwealth is found to be in violation of human rights, no Australian court can award a remedy. Certainly the Commission cannot do so. The Commission only has a power to report to Parliament with recommendations. Many Australians have fought for a Bill of Rights. Former Chief Justice Sir Anthony Mason stated that Australia's adoption of a Bill of Rights would bring Australia in from the cold, so to speak. We would have to agree. When is it going to end? When Australians are allowed to stand and be judged on what they do. I've always been for justice. You do something bad, I'll be the first one to chase you and make sure you go inside and you do your time. You hurt our community, you hurt our children. That's what I've been doing for the last 30 years, is making sure people like that get the justice they deserve. However, when we've got government agencies such as our Border Patrol, our new border agency, stating that our democratic beliefs, a parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, living peacefully, respect for all individuals regardless of background, compassion for those in need, they're good beliefs. Our freedoms, the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion and secular government. And our equalities, equality in Australia, equality of men and women and equality of opportunity. Well, I can honestly say I don't believe that that's the case. And I'm ashamed that I even believe that. Because I think this is a wonderful country. But we've seen it by the fact that our government officials are willing to put their religious beliefs in front of the will of the people. Ask the people. Stop telling us what we think and start putting it to what and asking us what do we think? What do we want as a country? The freedom to associate. This isn't the freedom. It's not guaranteed to us in writing. We've seen this in Queensland and South Australia most recently. Good, hard-working people who have paid their taxes their whole life, employ people, fight for their industries, have been told they can no longer own their business. Why? Because they're in the tattoo industry. Why? Because they ride with a club. Has that person broken any laws? No, in your own documentation you state may be used for, may be done, may be carried out. Prove it. Don't take people's livelihoods away. You are creating criminality. You are forcing people to become criminals. Why? Because you're taking away their honest livings. This is unacceptable. We are better than that, Australia. So if you believe this also, be in Canberra, 26 January 2016. Join us there and let the government know, let the Australian government know that we are petitioning for a Bill of Rights. We want to be heard. We need to be heard. We borrow this country, this land, from our children. And then we give it back to them. We need to be giving it back to them better than what we've done with it. We've got Indigenous peoples in this country who aren't recognised within our own constitution. It's time. It's time to recognise those people, and it's time to recognise good, hard-working Australian people for what and who they are, and stop discriminating based on the fact that your law enforcement agencies don't have the evidence. They're telling you that they're bad people. What about the law enforcement agencies who have bad people within them? What about the religious organisations who have committed unconscionable crimes against the children of this nation and of the world? None of you will act on them, but you'll act on people that you can easily make the bogeyman. If you have evidence, then put evidence forward. Take it before the courts. No one will argue with it. But the days of star chambers are long gone. It is time for a Bill of Rights for Australian citizens.